All right, welcome back to the Lucky Orange Show. I'm your host, Sean McCarthy, and today's episode is about a topic that's pretty near and dear to my heart because I've been in content marketing for quite a while in different parts of my career. And what I was thinking about heading into this conversation is that your own experience and your own perspective in something like content marketing really only takes you so far. The best way to learn about things and grow and better understand your skills and how you can apply them to a business is by speaking to other people. And specifically today, we're speaking with somebody who is really kind of in the dirt doing this, really helping a variety of different brands as an agency founder, doing all sorts of content marketing strategy and execution for a variety of different companies. And we'll get into that. So our guest today is Tina Donati. Tina, welcome. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. So we'll kind of navigate a variety of things about content marketing. And I think we could probably do a 10-hour, 12-part session on content marketing strategy. And in 3 months, do a 3-part follow-up. And then, there's so many different angles and perspectives when it comes to content marketing and the role that it plays in business. And so why don't we just kind of start at the highest of level, which is to say in your mind and when you talk to clients, what do you think are kind of the core elements that make up a content strategy?
Yeah. It's so funny because what you just said is so true. Like we could probably spend a full hour just on this question alone, but
Sure.
to try and summarize as much as I can. First things first is it's not just keyword research. And I actually don't start with keyword research. So I try to break it down into kind of like 10 different steps, and keyword research actually doesn't even come until like much later. But to try and simplify the process I would go through when working with a new client is, step one is budget and bandwidth. And, this might come out of left field of this being step one, but I have worked with so many companies where they actually don't understand how much of an investment content marketing really is and how long-term it is and how many resources you need with writers, sometimes designers and everything. So step one is really always understanding, like, do you actually have the budget and bandwidth to see the success that you want to see from your content strategy? Sure. And then is kind of like getting into the nitty gritty of things. So, like outlining your goals, understanding who your ICP actually is, and then figuring out what their customer journey looks like. Next after that is always auditing your current content. So if you've been trying things for a little while and you're maybe not seeing the results that you want to see, so taking a peek at what you've currently been doing and finding those gaps and areas of opportunities. And then creating, your buckets, categories, and topics. So what are the different branches of categories that you want to be talking about through your content, and then specifically those topics. And then keyword research actually starts to come into play. So for me, it's not even until step 7 that you get to keyword research. So outlining what those topics look like, doing the research, what are the answers that people are asking for in, Google search, for example, and how can you answer those questions? And then building out your content calendar and choosing your distribution channels. And then, finally tracking your success, figuring out what's been working, what's not been working. So if I had to really simplify, those are like my 10 steps for start to finish.
Yeah, no, and that just is a good starting point to say there is a lot that goes into this. And I think that having been on different in-house teams, doing content, doing all sorts of stuff in this kind of area, you do have to kind of pick and choose sometimes where you start, what you do if you're taking over a brand or whatever it might be. One thing you talked about there that I'd like to kind of explore a little bit more is on the auditing side of things. I think a lot of people find themselves in a career path where they're taking over an existing marketing content effort, a previous content effort. They show up and there's a blog with all kinds of stuff on it or whatnot. Can you talk a little bit about auditing strategy and where you might go there? I know that previously I've done sort of rot auditing where I'll look through a blog and do that, but maybe how in your world you see that playing out with auditing.
Yeah, I think pruning your content is something you should honestly do like every 6 months. But, I've been in your position too. Like sometimes I'm building from scratch. Sometimes I'm coming in with a strategy that's been implemented for a few years. And again, they're not seeing the results that they want to see. So that's where auditing is super helpful. And I always just start with like, looking in the tools that I have available to me, whether that's like SEMrush, Google Search Console, and just trying to see, like what was maybe happening in the first year compared to the second year. Where was that change, like the key drop that maybe they were seeing that made them have this panic of things are not working and we need help. And then, just even going through the content itself, like what do they have published on the blog, for example? How is it written? Is it high quality content? Are they properly answering the queries? And then I don't like diving into this too much because I'm not a technical person. I'm not a technical SEO person, but sometimes that does play a really big role into your results for things like organic ranking. And I have been in a position before where the content was high quality, and the keywords were growing month over month, and then suddenly this huge drop happened, and it was all related to a big website overhaul that the company had done. And when they did that rebrand and redesign, they didn't implement some best practices in terms of like having H1s coded properly. There was a lot of like broken links and stuff like that. So it really is like kind of looking on the back end of things as well as the front end. And I think the back end part can be like sometimes forgotten. So that's kind of how I would approach it, is just like, what are the front end things I need to look at, the quality, what the topics that they're writing about are, and then supplementing it with like, okay, if I can't find some major issues on the front end, are there things going on in the back end that we really can't see that's maybe dragging the results down? And sometimes it's not even related to ranking, right? Like maybe they're ranking, but they're not seeing like the conversion results that they want to see. So that's something I always say too, is like, you could rank number one for a keyword and be driving like thousands and thousands of people to your website. But if it's not the right audience, then that's just a vanity metric to say like, oh, like we're getting this many website visits, but they're not doing anything. So, maybe it's nothing to do with your organic rankings. Maybe you're doing well there. And it's more about like the conversion side of it. So that's another whole piece of auditing your content too, is, what's your page experience like? Do you have the right call to actions? Are you actually speaking to your audience in the best way that gets them interested in your products? Like there's so many elements to it, right? So I think you always need to tie it back to, okay, what's my goal with content? And am I doing the right things to achieve that goal?
Yeah. And there's a lot of conversation right now around how AI, specifically with Google, is the no click searches are kind of disrupting content, because maybe the informational search and the informational content will be served up through an AI response, and you don't get that click anymore. I'm curious if that conversation with clients is coming up. I imagine there's some level of like, hey, what do you think about AI? But more specifically, as it relates to the types of content you have to create, knowing that that's kind of where search is heading. What does that conversation look like right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. It hasn't come up a ton with my clients yet, to be honest, because I think they're more so, leaving it to me to be the one to tell them what's up with that stuff. But it's definitely come up in conversations with other content marketing friends of mine. So I have different groups that I'm in where we just like, monthly get on a call and talk about these things and how each of us are approaching it, which is very helpful. But it's definitely come up in those conversations. And it is interesting because, I mean, I believe that SEO isn't going to ever go away, right? Like it's changing. We all understand that, but it's not something that's ever going to not be important, because it applies to more than just Google search. Like SEO is on every algorithm, whether that's on social media, whether it's on YouTube. So I think it's more about like adapting the type of content that you're creating. And maybe you're focusing a little bit less on how to blog content that's targeting a specific, how to do X keyword, because AI is able to pull that information now. And instead it's, well, let's turn this into a video for YouTube, how to do X on YouTube or how to do X on LinkedIn. A lot of people are really loving that like short form / long form LinkedIn content lately. So I think it's just about like adapting to a new channel and then keeping your blog maybe to other specific things that's more about like customer stories or specific things about your product even. But that being said, like, I also want to say we don't necessarily know where AI is going to go or where that Google search AI is going to go. And I think like as content marketers, we have a tendency to really be thinking about the future. And I don't think that that's a bad thing, but sometimes we get so invested in the future that we forget about the now. And there's still things that we need to do now that also work. So it's like, you can keep investing in the future and trying to predict what's going to happen. Like if we could all predict things, we'd all have won the lottery at this point. But we're not wasting our time trying to do that every single week. So there's still things that you need to invest in now that are best practices. So don't fall behind on those things because you're so worried about the future is kind of like one thing I will say there. But just like pay attention to it, know what's happening. But SEO is still very, very important. It's not dying, and just continue to test and alter and just be quick to iterate.
Yeah, I saw a presentation from, I think it's Andy Crestadina. He's an agency owner, long time marketing kind of expert, and he was talking about how even though what we're talking about with no-click searches and AI search results and stuff may be proliferating, the AI is still getting that information from the internet. And so if you approach content marketing in the traditional manner, you're still spreading the reach of your brand name and your solution and whatever it might be, and you can show up in those algorithms, because the disruption of a no-click search is just one thing, but there's still a lot of these AI tools where it'll say there is a search result to be had, there's a destination, and it could be your website, and the only way you get into that algorithm is by doing everything we've always done, which is use your name more and describe your brand more and whatever it might be. And you brought up video as a great example, where it's like, every time you publish a video and it says your brand name in it and you have a transcript, that's another touch point for the AI tool, the LLM, to be navigating. And I think it's really smart to say that like this stuff isn't going away. And that kind of makes me think about how with content marketing, one of the worst possible things you can do is just pivot your strategy constantly. And you have to stick to it. And it's the same thing for a lot of things in business. You obviously can't be blind to negative trends, and you can't say we never have to make adjustments. But specifically with content, it's like you got to just go for it and trust that your strategy is heading in the right direction. And that's why working with somebody like you makes a lot of sense, because it's like you need an expert to say, these are the content pillars, these are the channels you need to be in, these are the things you need to be talking about. But once we press go, we've got to keep sticking to it for months, years, whatever it is, to see lift.
Yeah, that's the toughest conversation that I have with founders, because they're so used to like quick win things. Like they've invested in ads a little bit, and they've like tried like, maybe the partnerships channel a little bit, which even partnerships takes a long time to build, but still like they're kind of used to like the quick turnaround things. So it's like to try and say like, hey, we're going to do this thing for like a year before we really like can understand its impact is kind of a difficult conversation to have. So it is a really, really good point. And you know what, like even just like thinking back to the AI thing too, like I have some people, or AI and SEO, I have some people say like, okay, it's not worth investing in SEO because it takes too long. Like we're just going to write content that's going to be like viral in the moment. And that's great, but it's inconsistent. And that's an even harder investment than SEO, because you constantly have to be aware of like the trends that are happening. And you have to know that the pieces that you write are only going to be relevant for like a certain period of time. They have a shelf life. Whereas when you're investing in SEO, you're building something that's snowballing. And even though it's a long-term investment, it's like the more you add to it, the bigger it gets, and the more you can rely on it as just like an ongoing traffic source. And that's just something like you need to be aware of is like, do you want to be the person that's just like hitting on trends every single week and then losing that audience the next week unless you have something else to write about? Or do you want to have something that's going to be running always in the background that you can rely on and then supplement it with those trending topics?
Yeah, definitely. I want to shift a little bit into something that's a bit of an unknown for me, which is content strategy for e-commerce. I typically think of content strategy as content marketing and publishing blog posts and support content and serving certain goals for the organization, but I've never actually worked specifically on an e-commerce store. And so I'm curious what you would say the primary differences are, the way you change your approach when it comes to content marketing for e-commerce.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, I'll say, like, most of my client base is also like the software brands. I do have, some folks that I work with that are brands. One specifically I can mention is a woman's shoe brand that I've been working with for a bit. So I'll kind of dive into that as I'm answering the questions. But, if you really think about it, like the elements really aren't that different. At the end of the day, like you're still crafting stories to share with your buyers. And maybe instead of like backlinking to your services pages, you're backlinking to product pages. You're still breaking down the funnel between, different channels and topics and everything like that. So, that's really not a whole lot different when you're approaching the strategy side of it. But one thing that I'll say, not different from B2B, but maybe is more important on the e-commerce side is thinking holistically about, where content truly plays into your entire marketing strategy. So I think when most people think of content strategy, they think of blogs, but content strategy is everywhere. It's your emails, it's your social media, it's your ads, it's your landing pages. So one big difference that I feel like I always see is like for B2B companies, they tend to like start with blog as like something that they do very early on. It's always like a very high priority for smaller businesses. Whereas on the e-commerce side, I feel like depending on the company, obviously, because it's going to change like, who your audience is and what type of content they want to consume. But I tend to find that blogging, might not be a part of an e-commerce brand strategy for a little while. And I would say that's usually because there are typically other content formats that are more important right away, which is like video content on like TikTok and Instagram Reels. And like all of your email flows and campaigns are like essential things to set up, right? Like your welcome flow, your win back flow, your like transactional flows, all that stuff. So that's like the one difference I feel like I see between e-commerce and B2B is like B2B companies tend to invest in blog content specifically a lot earlier on, whereas e-commerce, I feel like there's like some other elements that they need to focus on first. But again, like separate content, I'm thinking content strategy separate from SEO strategy here. And I want to like make that super clear because they play off each other, but they're different. And SEO is still very, very important for e-commerce businesses. So because I'm saying that they maybe focus on blogs a little bit later than B2B, I'm not saying they don't focus on SEO. SEO is something that every business should be focusing on very early on, e-commerce, B2B, whatever you may be. So e-commerce brands who are listening to this, please don't take that as you should invest in SEO because you definitely should.
Right. I think there's been this natural evolution of, or maybe not natural, but evolution of content marketing as a field where when it first, became in vogue to call yourself a content marketer, however many years ago, you were carving out a niche to say, this is content marketing and this is marketing on the other side of the fence. And they maybe work together, but they're not extremely similar. And now it's just like, well, yeah, content marketing is a core part of marketing. And so drawing those lines may be somewhat unnecessary sometimes. And, you're ultimately serving a business goal and you're ultimately serving some sort of KPI out there. And I think what happens a lot, just keeping it real, is that people get into a position specifically on an in-house team and they want to create content that's really visible and that they can point to and say, hey, I'm doing something. And that's why I feel like a blog is sort of a easy win for a lot of people. They come in, they learn a little bit about the topic and they just start pumping out blogs, where we really, really need to pump the brakes and say, what is that actually serving? It's just, if it's serving an SEO goal, that's great, but publishing a blog post and just hitting publish isn't really serving anything, unless it has proper keyword research and is actually aligned with a content pillar that's an ongoing thing and whatever. But I think it's really interesting when we're talking about like e-commerce and B2B and these different types of places that would have content marketing efforts, what that actual role looks like in the team, and what their focus should be. It's really just marketing at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. Content is everywhere. And I like really big throwback here, but back when I was in university, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to study, I was really back and forth between like English lit and sociology, and I ended up doing both. But I remember talking to my English lit professor because I was like, well, I just don't really know what I'm going to do with an English lit degree. And she's like, writing is everywhere. No matter what you do in your life, you have to be a good writer. It's always going to be part of every single thing that you do. And I've really taken that with me because I think the same sort of element applies to marketing. If you think about what marketing is, it's content. it's video content, it's brand design content, it's written content, it's, visuals. All of that is just different types of content. But as a content marketer, like maybe you focus on one of those specific things. Maybe you're just a really solid writer. Maybe you're a really solid, visual designer. But at the end of the day, like you still need to be able to look at all of those different content types and understand the impact they're going to have on the business as a whole. So, just to basically say that I agree with you. Content is everywhere. It's a whole part of marketing.
It really is. Yeah. And it's not getting replaced by AI overnight. Certain segments of it might be, but I'm curious, when you kind of along those lines, when you work with a client, you're discussing their marketing goals, their business goals, how do you start to turn that into content marketing opportunities? And, I say that to say, when I look at like the SEO landscape for like our world and B2B SaaS, specifically website optimization SaaS, it's really hyper competitive. And so there may be less opportunity there than other spaces for us. I'm curious how you go about finding a space that says, I think that an increased content quality or content production amount can actually make a difference in this space.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one example I'll pull up is I had a client that was saying to me recently that the distribution side of our content is far more important than the content and like the content itself, which I agree. How many times have we seen, as you just kind of mentioned, content marketers creating a blog, publishing it, and like leaving it and moving on because they're just trying to show like, hey, I'm doing something, like I'm helping the business. And while I agree with that sentiment, I also strongly believe that the quality needs to be super important. And I think that's something that people forget because that is your first introduction to a potential customer. So maybe your distribution is super great, but if someone took the time to, like fill out a form to download something like a PDF or found your blog or whatever, and the copy or the story or the content itself is so poor quality, which you tend to get from AI. But you've broken that relationship. First impressions are so important. We tell people that all the time. You're not going to walk up to someone in person and say, I can't talk to you unless you do XYZ for me. Right. Like that person's going to be like, go away. Like, I don't need to talk to you then. So the same thing is very important with your content marketing strategy is like the quality does matter. And yes, the distribution matters too, but like, just don't forget the quality. And I think I went on a tangent there. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely. And content quality, I think one of the things that I've been doing, because we're a smaller team at Lucky Orange. And so we're only creating content that serves a really specific goal or specific need. Obviously, like podcast conversations and stuff, there's a downstream impact of having these videos, these conversations recorded. But when it comes to something like a blog post, we're not just creating something to create something because we don't have time for that. So we're creating something that has to be high quality, but it also has to serve some sort of specific need. Like, hey, customers are having a problem with this specific feature. They need more education about it, whatever it is. And so we're kind of hitting that specifically there. And then success of that piece of content is based on either like a slowdown of customer complaints or whatever it might be, people clicking on a link in an email to go read that because we're seeing that it's interesting for them.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Kind of on that front, the last step that you described in the initial strategy flow is measurement. Obviously, measurement leads to further creation and strategy and optimization. But within that space, it's a challenge for marketers to draw attribution lines and to develop KPIs that make sense, that are based on benchmarks and whatever. What does that conversation look like with people when they say, sure, we want more quality, you can help us with strategy and say the right things, but when the rubber meets the road and the person comes in the room and says, is this working? What do you look at when it comes to judging success of a content marketing campaign?
Yeah, it's the toughest part of being a content marketer.
Right.
And it's not an easy fix. Just to backtrack a little bit, I think first is like understanding what are your different purposes of creating content to begin with. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, conversions. We want people buying our products or using our software. Like that's our only goal. And it's like, okay, I'm sure there's other goals too. So like to go back to what you said about maybe the sales team needs something that's going to like supplement their efforts. Or, you know, maybe your partnership team needs something that's going to help them build a new partnership with a certain agency. That's not going to necessarily lead to conversions directly. It's not like A plus B equals C, but you're still supporting the business goal because you're helping the partnership team secure a new partnership. And in that new partnership, the agency is going to refer leads over and blah, blah, blah. So it's like content is so hard to track because it can sometimes be such a background supplementary thing to the other business efforts. And so I think that's always number one is like figuring out, okay, what are the actual purposes for the content that we're creating? Is it to rank and get in front of new audiences and have them install our product? Or is it to support the sales and partnership team? Or am I just helping the founder with their, you know, their brand on LinkedIn? Like there's all these different purposes. So I think that's number one is like identifying those and then just being clear about what those are to the team that you're working with so that they're not seeing you work on a thought leadership post for the CEO's LinkedIn and being like, oh, well, why aren't we getting any leads from content? It's like, well, the goal was this, not that. So step one. And then the other thing is like, when it comes to tracking the content efforts in terms of like conversions and revenue, again, hardest thing to do. The most successful model I have seen that I've worked on as well, I did not set it up. I just said, this is what I need. And then, you know, the awesome, amazing, smart person that understood HubSpot really well set it up for me. But what I said was I really, really want to see a W model. So I want to see for like the demo requests that we get or the content downloads that we get or just like email signups that we get, I want to see what was their first touch and then what was their last touch before they actually converted. So first touch could be like, you know, they discovered us on social media. Last touch could be they discovered us from organic. And then from that organic search, they ended up, you know, booking a demo. And then I could go into each individual customer and say, okay, well, from the organic search, what page was it that they landed on? Oh, they went to this blog. Great. Or if it's like opposite, if it's that organic search was like the first part that they had, but then the last touch before they booked a demo was an outbound message from the sales team, I can still look and say, okay, well, organic search supplemented this journey in some way. And then from there, you know, depending on how much data you have access to and how easy it is to do, but what would be so good is if you can say like, okay, here's all of like the demo requests we had in the last quarter. Here's all the ones that closed. And out of the ones that closed, here's the percentage of ones that actually read our content so that you can say, hey, you know, like people that read our blog posts tend to close faster or close more. Or they stick around longer. Maybe they have like a higher retention rate with the product or service. So those are the types of things that you want to start being able to pick out as you like build out your reports and everything, because that's just going to secure the efforts that you're doing as a content marketer to say like, hey, what I do really has an impact in these different ways. It might not be direct. It might not be read a blog, buy a product, but it's supporting the customer journey in these different ways. And that's the picture that you want to be able to paint.
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate goal is that multi-touch attribution that's reliable, that you can make decisions off of. And if you have something like HubSpot or you have a tool that can make that easier and you have, like you said, the access to the data, then that is potentially achievable. It's within reach. And for a lot of people that don't have that, I think that they need to know that it's okay to not have that. You can still make smarter, higher quality content at a better speed and distribute it in a better way without knowing that. You can still write better. You can still make higher quality graphics. You can still have better brand consistency and whatever it is, and have huge leaps forward in your content marketing effort without being able to say this person read 2 blog posts and watched a video and then signed up, yada, yada, yada.
For sure. And I like, just to emphasize that too, like, I want to say most companies don't have their shit figured out when it comes to data. Like it's 1000%. Actually Yeah, it's very rare for someone to actually like have it all figured out. And most companies that I work with don't, like, truly, to be honest. Like, the like data's messy. It's hard to like put those journeys together and everything. So sometimes it really is just looking at the high level metrics and saying like, hey, traffic went up this quarter, and with traffic going up, we also got more customers. Like, there must be a correlation there. So don't let the details stop you. Like, that's something I really, really want to emphasize is like, don't let all the nitty gritty things be like make you not want to invest in content, because content is amazing and you should invest in it. And like, even the 10-step journey that I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, like, don't let that stop you from getting started. Like, just get started, just ship it, just publish it, just test, see what people like. And, you can always adapt and get better, but don't stop yourself from doing it now just because you're worried about all these like little nitty gritty things.
Yeah, hitting publish usually wins. And if you're a content leader, I think securing your place at the table in lieu of having all that data it's just making sure people understand that you are supporting those other business goals. You're supporting the founders LinkedIn. You're supporting these things, and it's not overly self-promotional, but it's helping people understand that doing this isn't hurting anything, one, but also that it's it's other touch points for people to see your brand, and it's educational, and it's helping sales enablement, whatever it might be, even if you can't prove it with extremely tight data. Because people that are outside of content marketing may not know what you just said, which is people don't have their shit together. They might think all their competitors do, which is easy to expect, but then you can point out other parts of the business and you say, okay, well, are we tracking everything else we're doing as tightly as that? The answer is probably no. Like, we're trying.
Yep. Communication's key.
Yeah. One last question. In your world in content marketing with clients and whatever it is, what has you most excited as we head into, amazingly, the back half already of 2024? What has you excited these days?
Oh, that's such a good question. Wow. Well, first, yeah, I definitely can't believe how far into the year we already are. Yeah, I think, what I've been seeing that I'm super excited about is a lot of like 90s, early 2000s aesthetic marketing lately. And I love it. Some of it's a little bit cringy, but I'm really, really loving it. Like, the best example I can think of was like Canva's like enterprise launch, and they like wrote a rap to it, and like, I don't know if you saw that, but they had like a whole like dance routine, and a lot of people were hating on it, and yes, totally cringy, but I don't know, I love that stuff. I kind of like the throwback to some of like the early marketing strategies, like even direct mails becoming a huge thing again. And I just think it's really fun to like kind of be switching things up. Like, it's, it kind of cycles through the same way like clothing, fashion, and trends do. Like, we have the flare out jeans again back in style. And I feel like marketing kind of goes through a similar progression where, hey, like, suddenly these things that worked like 30 years ago are like actually working again because they're seen as different. So I think some of that stuff is like really, really exciting to me. And I actually really want to invest in some direct mail myself with one of my clients. So TBD there. Might have some more fun stuff to share, but we're definitely talking about doing a really cool direct mail campaign.
Yeah, that's fun. The only direct mail I've ever been a part of was senior health insurance. And so highly regulated and super unsexy, but direct mail works. So all right, where can people find you and follow along? You're all over the place. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, definitely. Twitter's where I'm most active. So I'm just at Tina_Donati there. And then on LinkedIn, a little more active there lately as well. Definitely connect with me. Let's have a coffee chat. I love having coffee chats with folks just to like talk shop or whatever. So please don't hesitate or be shy to reach out. I think it'd be so much fun to connect with folks.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. And I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.